I thought I'd use temporal Earth to show how news got to Australia during the 19th century. So down here on the timeline we see the periods for which there's a contract for the regular delivery of mail to Australia, and these sort of white paths here show the routes that the ships took to get to Australia. The first contract is with the Toulmin brothers in the 1840s, and then there's a bunch of contracts in the 1850s, and then a break during the Crimean War because the companies decide that it's more lucrative for their ships to be ferrying troops across to the Crimean War. Then there's a brief contract with the European and Australian company, and then P&O start transporting mail to Australia, which links up with their whole Eastern network. And I'm going to stop in 1870, actually right about the time of the outbreak of the Franco-Prussian War. And my reason for doing this is because there's an excellent article by Peter Putness about how the news of the Franco-Prussian War came to Australia in sort of episodes on each ship. So let's go back, and you can see the routes that are active at this time. There's a route coming from the P&O's Eastern Mail network, and another one coming, it's actually from San Francisco, and maybe we'll have a look at that a bit later. But if we follow this route around here, we can see the P&O network as it stood at that time. You can also see some of the telegraph lines that stretched out all the way out here. And if we go right back to Britain, we can see the routes that the mail would take. If I zoom in even further onto this timeline, we get to see the ships themselves. So we'll see there's one leaving and heading over towards America, and then we'll see one now heading out. So this is the average ship that would send the average delivery of mail that would go out from Britain. If you wanted to take the cheapest route to send maybe a letter the cheapest way, you would need to put it on a ship by, say, the 6th of August. That ship would start going around the Iberian Peninsula, but mail could be sent up to a week later, and it would be put on a train and sent across on a railway line across France, and would catch up with that first delivery at Alexandria. Now at this time the Suez Canal isn't open at this point in time, but mail would be shipped across Egypt via a railway line and put on another ship that would travel through to Galle, which is in Ceylon, now Sri Lanka. And then from there, a ship would head out towards Australia. So let's follow that ship and see where it goes. So first of all, it lands at King George's Sound at Albany. And at this point, the main ship heads in the direction of Melbourne, which you can see down here. But they would take the mail off that was destined for Adelaide and use a branch steamer to head that directly over to Adelaide. And as soon as it would arrive at Port Adelaide, they would immediately be able to telegraph all of the headlines from the newspapers on that ship through, via these red lines here, through to all the other colonies, through to Melbourne, to Sydney, and to Queensland. And so for that reason, you would see articles would come out in the next day's papers, such as this, arrival of the English mail at Adelaide. So you can see this is on Monday 29th of August 1870, and you can see that it says that it arrived at Adelaide on the 28th. So it's been taken only one day to get around to all the other colonies and for the news to be distributed. Okay, and the ship continues around to Melbourne and to Sydney, and at that point they would get the complete newspapers, and that would mean people in Sydney could go scouring through the newspaper for any extra news that might be of relevance. Now, at the same time, as is discussed in the Putness article, there's also another route that's coming through America, And if we go back through time, maybe I'll go and trace this right back here. So this route goes, let's go back. There it is, though. There's those. So that route, a ship would head out maybe the start of September, head out across the Atlantic, land at New York, and from there it would be ferried across on railways. Now, it's actually faster to travel by rail at this point than it is to travel by sea. It would arrive at San Francisco, be ferried across to Hawaii, and then Australia and New Zealand had chartered ships that would take it from Hawaii and deliver it via New Zealand. New Zealand was very happy about this because it was when the mail came the other way, it was the very last to receive the mail. This way it was the first to receive the mail that was coming via this route. And then finally it would arrive in Sydney. And so in that case, you would now see an article that would look something like this. Arrival of the Wonga Wonga with the mails via San Francisco. War news to August 11th. And that means you've got an extra 4 days worth of news of what's happening in the Franco-Prussian War, but it's actually taken another 20 or so days to arrive at Sydney. So that's a bit of a look at how mail was arriving. If I zoom back out on the timeline, back out to here, we can see the length of the Franco-Prussian War. And then when we get to 1874, that's when they start to provide actually 3 different routes. And this is the point where the delivery of mail to Australia becomes stable. You can see that that San Francisco route actually peters out in 1871, but it's in 1874 onwards that we get much more stable routes. One via the Torres Strait, bringing mail through Queensland to arrive at Sydney. One via San Francisco to Sydney, and the other, the P&O route, to King George's Sound and across to Adelaide, Melbourne, Sydney.